I never thought I'd be the woman who finds lipstick on her husband's collar. That's the stuff of paperback novels and daytime television, not my life with David. 15 years of marriage built on shared jokes, weekend pancake traditions, and the kind of comfort that comes from knowing someone's breathing patterns in the dark. Yet there I was, standing in our laundry room on a Tuesday afternoon, holding his white dress shirt with a smudge of crimson that didn't belong to me. My hands trembled as I ran my thumb across it. Chanel Rouge Allure. I knew because I'd considered buying it last Christmas, but decided it was too bold for me. David had always said he liked my natural look anyway. Apparently, he liked bold on someone else. I sat down on the tile floor, the cold seeping through my jeans as evidence collected. In my mind, like a prosecutor building a case. Late nights at the office, the new cologne, his phone perpetually face down, the way he'd stopped reaching for me in bed. They weren't just coincidences anymore. They were exhibits A through E. Sarah? I'm home early. His voice echoed through. Our house. Our craftsman style with the blue door we'd picked together. The one with the crooked mailbox. And the garden I'd planted with my mother before she died. I didn't answer. I just held that shirt in my lap like it was a confession written in scarlet. His footsteps approached, and I watched his expression shift when he found me. First confusion, then recognition, then that peculiar blend of fear and calculation I'd never seen on his face before. It transformed him into someone I didn't recognize. "It's not what you think," he said, the oldest line in the book. I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. "Then what is it, David? Because I think another woman's lipstick is on your collar, and I think you've been lying to my face for months." He knelt in front of me, too close, invading the bubble of hurt I'd created. It was just a mistake. A stupid one-time mistake with someone from accounting. It didn't mean anything. The calm in my voice frightened me. If it didn't mean anything, why did it happen more than once? His eyes widened. He hadn't expected me to know more, but I did. The hotel charge on our credit card statement, the missed anniversary dinner, the text I glimpsed last week when his phone lit up. "Miss you already." "How long?" I asked. "Sarah, please." "How long?" He exhaled, running his hand through the salt and pepper hair I used to love twirling around my fingers. 3 months. 3 months. 90-some days of good morning kisses that followed nights in someone else's arms. 3 months of I love you that meant I love you despite loving her too. "Her name is Melissa," he continued, as if naming his sin would somehow diminish it. "She's new at the firm. It just happened. Things don't just happen. Storms just happen. Traffic just happens. Affairs are built brick by brick, choice by choice." I stood up, my legs steadier than I expected. "I need you to leave." "This is my house too," he protested, standing to meet my gaze. "And this was my life too," I countered, dropping his shirt at his feet. "But you decided to share both with someone else. So now you can share her couch tonight." He tried reasoning, then pleading, then anger, the predictable progression of a man who's lost control of his narrative. I remained unmoved, a statue of a woman I didn't yet know I could be. Eventually, he packed a bag, promising to call tomorrow when I'd calmed down enough to talk reasonably. After the door closed behind him, I walked through our home touching, things that suddenly felt different. Photo frames from our wedding, the throw blanket we'd picked up in Vermont, his coffee mug in the sink. 15 years reduced to artifacts of a life I thought was real. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself the expensive whiskey he saved for special occasions and took it to the porch swing. The spring evening wrapped around me as I swayed, gently, watching our neighbors' kids play in the twilight. Life continuing as if mine hadn't just imploded. My phone buzzed with his first text. I'm sorry. We can fix this. But sitting there, feeling the first genuine emotion I'd had in months, a curious blend of grief and possibility, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The morning after David left, I woke up on the couch, my neck stiff and my mouth dry from the whiskey. Sunlight streamed through windows I'd forgotten to close, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air. Tiny, chaotic things with no direction. I felt a strange kinship with them. My phone showed 17 missed calls and a string of texts ranging from apologetic to defensive. The last one, sent at 3:42 a.m., simply read, "I still love you." Does that count for anything? I didn't know yet. Love had always seemed like such a solid thing to me, reliable, unwavering. Now it felt like quicksand beneath my feet, in the shower. I examined my body with new eyes. Was I too soft where she was firm? Too familiar where she was novel? I hated myself for the comparison, for giving him the power to make me doubt the vessel that had carried me through 42 years of life. Water mixed with the first tears I'd allowed myself to shed, both disappearing down the drain together. My sister Claire arrived unannounced at noon, a casserole in one hand and righteous anger in the other. David had called her, worried, because I wasn't responding. "That absolute bastard," she declared, setting down her offering on the kitchen counter. "I always thought he was too charming for his own good." "You never said anything," I pointed out, accepting the fierce hug she offered. "Would you have believed me?" Her question hung between us, honest and uncomfortable. She was right. I wouldn't have. I'd been too invested in the narrative we'd built, the successful lawyer husband and the supportive wife who'd put her own career in museum curation on hold to follow his promotions across 3 states. The couple who hosted dinner parties and remembered everyone's birthdays. The perfect modern marriage. Claire stayed through the afternoon, helping me change the sheets on our bed and listening as I talked in circles, trying to make sense of a senseless situation. When she left, she made me promise to eat something and call Mom. Instead, I drove to the beach, the small rocky stretch 30 minutes from our house where David and I used to spend Sunday mornings in our first years together. The tide was coming in, waves crashing against the shore in rhythmic persistence. I took off my shoes and walked along the wet sand, letting the cold water occasionally catch my ankles. My wedding ring felt heavy, a shackle rather than a symbol. I twisted it around my finger, remembering the day he placed it there with promises that now rang hollow. I didn't take it off, though. Not yet. Some habits are harder to break than others. A couple walked past, hands intertwined, leaning into each other against the wind. I wondered if they too had secrets between them, or if their togetherness was as genuine as it appeared. How many marriages were facades, beautiful structures built on faulty foundations? Had I been naive to believe ours was different? My phone rang as the sun began its descent. David's name illuminated the screen like a warning light. "What do you want?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, harder, sharper. "To talk," he said. "Face to face. I owe you that much." "You owe me fidelity," I countered, "but it's a bit late for that." He sighed, the sound of a man who believed himself truly remorseful. "Sarah, please. Tomorrow. Coffee at Ellington's. Neutral territory." Neutral. Territory. As if we were negotiating a peace treaty after war. Perhaps we were. Fine. 10 o'clock. I hung up before he could respond, before I could change my mind. Back home, I opened a bottle of wine and took it to the guest bathroom, the one place in our house that felt least marked by his presence. I filled the tub with water hot enough to turn my skin pink and sank into it, letting the heat and alcohol dull the edges of my pain. My thoughts turned to Melissa from accounting. Was she young and vibrant? Did she look at David with adoration, untarnished by years of mundane domesticity? I wondered what she knew about me. Had he described our marriage as broken beyond repair? Had he mentioned our struggles to conceive, the years of fertility treatments that had left us both exhausted and distant? Or was I simply an inconvenient fact, a hurdle in their path to happiness? As the water cooled, I reached a conclusion that felt like the first solid ground I'd found in days. Whatever David said tomorrow, whatever excuses or explanations he offered, I deserved more than being someone's second choice, more than a marriage, preserved out of obligation or guilt. I deserved truth. I deserved wholeness. Whether that included David remained to be seen. Wrapping myself in a towel, I wiped the steam from the mirror and really looked at the woman reflected back. Behind the puffy eyes and flushed cheeks was someone I'd lost touch with years ago. The woman who once had dreams beyond being Mrs. David Campbell. The woman who used to paint on weekends and plan solo trips to art museums in neighboring cities. "Hello." "Again," I whispered to her, placing my palm against the cool glass. "I think we have some catching up to do." Ellington's coffee shop sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, a renovated Victorian house with mismatched chairs and local art adorning exposed brick walls. I arrived 20 minutes early, a habit from childhood that David used to tease me about. Today, I was grateful for it. I needed the buffer of time to settle my nerves and claim territory at the table in the back corner, my back to the wall, facing the entrance. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. I ordered a black coffee, something I rarely drank before the revelation of David's betrayal. The bitterness felt appropriate now, a small act of reinvention. The barista, a young man with kind eyes, must have sensed something in my demeanor because he brought over a chocolate biscotti on the house. "Rough morning?" he asked, setting it beside my cup. "Rough life," I replied with a half smile that felt like progress. David arrived 5 minutes early, looking both familiar and foreign, in his casual Saturday attire. The navy sweater I'd bought him last Christmas, jeans that had seen better days. His face was drawn, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights that perversely gave me a flicker of satisfaction. Good. Let him lose sleep. "Sarah," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. His hand moved as if to reach for mine, then retreated when he saw my expression. "Thank you for coming." "I'm here," I said simply, wrapping my fingers around my mug to keep them from trembling. "Say what you need to say." He took a deep breath, eyes darting around the cafe before settling back on me. "It's over with Melissa. I ended it yesterday. It was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life." "A 3-month mistake," I reminded him, the words sharp on my tongue. "I know." He looked down at his hands. "I can't explain it in a way that will make sense or hurt less. I was lost, I guess. After the last round of IVF failed, and you started pulling away." "Don't you dare," I interrupted, my voice low but intense. "Don't you dare put this on me or on what we went through together. I was grieving. We both were. But I didn't seek comfort in someone else's bed." The unfairness of his implied accusation ignited something in me. Not just anger, but clarity. The fertility treatments had been brutal, yes. 3 years of hormones and hope and heartbreak. But they had happened to us, not just to him. David's shoulders slumped. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to blame you. I'm trying to understand it myself. Did you ever love her?" The question escaped before I could consider whether I really wanted to know the answer. He hesitated just long enough for me to have my answer. "I thought I might," he finally admitted. "But it wasn't real, not like what we have." "Had," I corrected. "What we had." A flash of panic crossed his face. "Sarah, we can fix this. People recover from affairs. We can get counseling. Rebuild trust. 15 years isn't something to throw away. I sipped my coffee, buying time as I considered his words. Part of me, the part that still woke up reaching for his warmth beside me, wanted to grab this lifeline. But another part, growing stronger by the hour, recognized the fundamental breach that had occurred. I need time, I finally said. I can't make any decisions right now. Of course, he agreed quickly, too quickly. Take all the time you need. I can stay with Mark for a while longer. Or you could... if you wanted to go stay with Claire for a bit, get some space. I'm not leaving our home, I said firmly. You made this mess. You get to experience the inconvenience. We talked for another hour, circling the same points without resolution. He wanted forgiveness and a roadmap back to normalcy. I couldn't offer either. When we finally parted ways outside the coffee shop, he hugged me with desperate familiarity. I remained stiff in his embrace, suddenly aware of how differently he smelled, like someone else's detergent, someone else's life. Walking home through Oak Ridge Park, I found myself noticing details I'd been too preoccupied to see on recent passes. The first crocuses pushing through the soil, an elderly couple feeding birds from a shared bag of breadcrumbs, a young girl learning to ride a bike with determined concentration. Life continuing in all its mundane beauty. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. How did it go? Need me to come over? I'm okay, I typed back, taking the long way home to clear my head. Love you, sis. Whatever you decide. Whatever I decided. The words echoed as I continued walking. For so long, my decisions had been shaped around our marriage, our future, our plans. Now the landscape of possibility stretched before me, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. At home, I ignored the blinking light on our answering machine and headed straight to the spare room we'd once designated as a future nursery, before converting it to a home office when those dreams faded. In the back of the closet, behind winter coats and tax files, I found what I was looking for. My old art supplies, untouched for years. I carried the dusty box to the kitchen table, opening it like a time capsule from a previous life. Dried out, paints, stiffened brushes, sketchbooks filled with half-finished ideas. On impulse, I grabbed my car keys again and drove to the art supply store across town. 2 hours later, I sat on our back porch with a new canvas, fresh paints, and a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades I would have once thought impossible to capture. I mixed colors without purpose, letting my hands remember what my mind had forgotten. The painting that emerged wasn't beautiful or skilled. Too many years had passed without practice for that. But it was honest. A landscape of chaos and possibility, of endings and beginnings indistinguishable from one another. I signed my maiden name in the corner, Sarah Mitchell, and felt something like peace settle over me for the first time in days. Rumors travel faster than truth in small communities. By Tuesday, my phone was buzzing with concerned texts from friends I hadn't heard from in months. The dinner party circuit that had defined our social life for years suddenly activated like an emergency response system. Not for my benefit, I suspected, but to gather intelligence on the implosion of the Campbell marriage. Brunch tomorrow? Just us girls. No pressure to talk about anything, texted Diane, wife of David's law partner and queen bee of our social circle. The same Diane who had introduced David to every client's attractive daughter at the firm's Christmas party last year. I declined politely, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely fictional. The thought of sitting across from women who might have known, who might have whispered behind napkins while I laughed obliviously at their husbands' jokes, it made me physically ill. Only Rebecca, my oldest friend in town, got through my defenses. She showed up at my door without warning, armed with Thai food and no expectations. You look terrible, she said bluntly, brushing past me into the kitchen. which is completely appropriate given the circumstances. Rebecca had never been part of the lawyer wife circle. A divorced high school art teacher with wild curly hair and paint-stained hands, she'd remained my friend despite the gradual social segregation that had occurred as David climbed the partnership ladder. "How much do you know?" I asked, watching her unpack containers of pad thai and green curry. "Enough," she replied. "David called James for advice. James told me." James was Rebecca's ex-husband, still on surprisingly good terms with her despite their split 7 years earlier. "And what pearls of wisdom did James offer?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Rebecca snorted. "He told David he was an idiot who deserved whatever came his way. James may be flawed, but he's never been stupid about what matters." We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the spicy food warming me from the inside out. "Have you told your mother?" Rebecca finally asked. I shook my head. Mom had been so proud when I married David, a lawyer with prospects, so different from my father who'd abandoned us when I was 12. The disappointment would crush her almost as much as it had crushed me. "You'll have to eventually," Rebecca pointed out. "Better from you than town gossip reaching her bridge club." She was right, of course. I called Mom that night, stumbling through explanations that felt inadequate even to my own ears. Her response surprised me. "Oh, Sarah," she sighed. "Men like your father and David, they think happiness is always one door down from where they're standing. They spend their lives walking through doors, never realizing they're just bringing themselves to each new room." It was the most insightful thing I'd ever heard her say about my father's desertion. Maybe she'd been doing her own reflection all these years. The most difficult public moment came 3 days later at the grocery store. I was examining avocados when I heard a familiar voice at the end of the aisle. David, on his phone, laughing at something the caller had said. The intimate tone left little doubt who was on the other end. I abandoned my half-filled cart and slipped out the side entrance, sitting in my car until my breathing steadied. It wasn't just the betrayal freshly experienced. It was the realization that our town of 40,000 was suddenly too small for both of us. Every restaurant, every store, every street corner held the possibility of unexpected encounters. That evening, I created a LinkedIn profile for the first time in years. My resume felt like archaeological evidence of a woman who once had professional ambitions. Museum studies degree, curatorial assistant at the Westlake Gallery, special projects coordinator at the Metropolitan before following David to this town, where the closest thing to fine art was the regional watercolor competition at the county fair. There wasn't much demand for museum curators in Oak Ridge, but 2 hours away in the city, possibilities existed. I updated my credentials, wincing at the 10-year gap that would raise employers' eyebrows. Under professional summary, I hesitated before typing. Experienced curator seeking to re-enter the field after family priorities, passionate about making art accessible to diverse audiences. Family priorities. The euphemism tasted sour. The truth, put career on hold for husband who ultimately betrayed me, wouldn't play well in interviews. A text from David interrupted my job browsing. "Need to pick up some files from home office tomorrow. Okay to come by around 10? The thought of him in our house, even briefly, made my stomach clench. But it was still his home legally, and the files were legitimately his. Fine, I'll be out. I didn't tell him I'd be at the City Art Museum, submitting my resume in person for their volunteer docent program. A small step, perhaps, but it was mine alone. The first thread in a new pattern I was just beginning to weave. Melissa Anderson was younger than I expected, but not dramatically so. Mid-30s, perhaps, with the kind of effortless beauty that probably hadn't required much maintenance yet. I recognized her immediately when she walked into the French bistro downtown, though we'd never formally met. Facebook photos from firm events I'd skipped had made her face vaguely familiar, and something in my gut simply knew this was the woman. I hadn't planned the encounter. After my museum interview, I'd treated myself to a solo lunch at Pierre's, a small luxury that felt both defiant and empowering. She appeared as my dessert arrived, taking a seat at the bar while waiting for someone, frequently checking her watch. Heart hammered against my ribs as I watched her order a glass of white wine. She wore a cream blouse and tailored pants, her dark hair falling in smooth waves around a face that looked simultaneously confident and anxious. I wondered if she was waiting for David, if they still met despite his claims of ending things. The thought propelled me out of my seat before I could reconsider. "Melissa?" I said, approaching with outward calm that belied the earthquake inside me. Her head snapped up, confusion quickly giving way to recognition, and then, interestingly, something like shame. "Mrs. Campbell," she said, her voice steady but her fingers tightening around the wine stem. "Sarah." "May I?" I gestured to the empty stool beside her. She nodded, looking as though she might prefer to dissolve into the polished wood floor. I sat, ordering a glass of the same wine she was drinking when the bartender glanced our way. The symmetry felt important somehow. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said quietly. "I just think I deserve to hear your side of things." Melissa took a deep breath, her professional composure visibly reasserting itself. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Probably not," I agreed, "but it's happening anyway." The wine arrived. I took a sip, letting the silence stretch between us until she broke it. "It wasn't. I never meant to hurt anyone," she finally said, the cliché falling flat between us. And yet, she met my eyes directly for the first time. "And yet," she echoed. "I'm sorry." "Did he tell you our marriage was over?" I asked, the question that had gnawed at me for weeks. "Not exactly." She looked down at her hands. "He said you were distant, that you'd been through some difficult times and weren't the same people anymore." I absorbed the half-truth, the careful framing that absolved him without being an outright lie. We had been through difficult times. The failed fertility treatments had changed us both, but distant hadn't been my choice. It had been the natural consequence of his gradual withdrawal. "Did you know he was still sleeping with me? Still planning our anniversary trip? Still looking at retirement properties?" My voice remained conversational, though the words felt like broken glass in my mouth. Her flinch told me enough. "I thought," she began, then stopped. "It doesn't matter what I thought." "It matters to me," I insisted. "I'm trying to understand how this happened, how my life imploded while I was busy planning herb gardens and dinner parties." Melissa turned her glass slowly between her fingers. "At first it was just drinks after work. Talking. He's a good listener." She laughed without humor. "Or maybe he just seems that way. He made me feel special, noticed. It's pathetic, isn't it? The junior associate falling for the charming partner. Such a stereotype." "When did it change?" I asked, though I wasn't sure why I needed to know. "After the firm retreat in February, we ended up alone at the hotel bar after everyone else went to bed. He told me about your struggles with having children." She at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. He seemed so sad, so in need of comfort. February. When I'd been in Florida helping my mother recover from knee surgery. When he'd called every night, telling me he missed me, asking about Mom's progress, promising to have my favorite meal ready when I returned. "And you comforted him," I said, flatly. "I'm not proud of it," she replied. "If it helps at all, he ended things completely after you found out. Said he'd made the biggest mistake of his life." It didn't help. Nothing could undo the months of parallel lives, the sheer magnitude of deception required to maintain both relationships. I finished my wine in one long swallow and stood up. "Thank you for your honesty," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. She looked up at me, confusion clear in her eyes. "That's it? You're not going to—" "I don't know. Tell me I'm a homewrecker, or throw your drink in my face." I almost smiled at the dramatic scenarios she'd apparently been imagining. Would either of those change anything that's happened? "No," she admitted. "Besides," I added, gathering my purse, "you didn't break my home. David did. You were just available." As I turned to leave, she called after me softly, "He does love you, you know. He talked about you all the time." I paused, considering her words. The thing is, Melissa, love without respect and honesty isn't love at all. It's just another form of selfishness. Walking out of the restaurant into the bright afternoon sunlight, I felt oddly unburdened. The woman who had haunted my imagination, sometimes a seductress, sometimes a predator, sometimes a victim, was just a person. Flawed and human, neither villain nor innocent. Just like David. Just like me. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Left the files. Made coffee too, but you weren't back yet. Can we talk tonight?" I didn't respond immediately. For the first time, since discovering his betrayal, I felt no urgent need to react to his overtures, no compulsion to either lash out or reconcile. The path forward was still unclear, but standing still no longer felt like drowning. The letter from the Metropolitan Museum of Art arrived on a Thursday, exactly 1 month after I'd discovered David's infidelity. I stared at the return address, heart racing as I carefully opened the heavy cream envelope. Inside was an offer for a 6-month contract position in their American wing, assisting with a special exhibition on women artists of the early 20th century. I'd applied on a whim after reconnecting with my former supervisor at the volunteer orientation. Catherine had seemed genuinely pleased to see me, and after hearing about my situation, the sanitized version, she'd mentioned the temporary opening. "We need someone with your eye for detail," she'd said. "And frankly, your knowledge of the period is still better than most of our current staff." Now, sitting on my porch swing with the offer letter in hand, possibilities unfurled before me like a road leading away from the wreckage of my marriage. The position paid modestly but would reconnect me to the art world I'd abandoned. It would also require moving to the city, at least temporarily. I was still contemplating this when David's car pulled into the driveway. Our scheduled discussion about finances, delayed twice already because of his emergency client meetings. I tucked the letter into my pocket, an instinctive gesture of protection. "The house looks different," he remarked after awkward greetings, glancing around the living room where I'd rearranged furniture and replaced our wedding photos with art prints. "It is different," I replied simply. We sat at the dining table with laptops and bank statements, the clinical dissection of our shared life reduced to numbers and assets. Halfway through reviewing our investment accounts, he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began, that familiar, hesitant tone that preceded what he considered a generous offer. "What if I keep the house, but you stay here until you figure out your next steps? No rush." The condescension in his assumption that I needed his charity ignited something in me. I withdrew the Metropolitan letter and placed it on the table between us. "My next steps are already figured out," I said, watching him scan the document. "I'm taking the position." His expression shifted from surprise to something darker. "New York? That's a bit dramatic, isn't it? Running across the country because of one mistake?" "This isn't about you," I said, surprised to discover I mostly meant it. "This is about me remembering who I was before I became Mrs. David Campbell." "And who was that exactly?" he asked, an edge to his voice. "Someone who abandoned her career the minute marriage was on the table?" The jab landed as intended, exposing my own insecurities about the choices I'd made. but I refused to let him reshape this narrative. Someone who believed in partnership and compromise, I countered. Someone who thought her husband valued her happiness as much as she valued his. We stared at each other across the table, 15 years of shared history crackling between us like static electricity. "I never asked you to give up your career," he finally said, softer now. "No," I agreed. "You just made it impossible to..." "Keep it. 3 moves in 5 years for your promotions. The expectation that I'd handle all, the social obligations that came with your position, the subtle comments about how my museum salary wasn't worth the stress it caused." His gaze dropped to the table. "I didn't realize you resented me so much." "I didn't," I said honestly. "I loved you enough to believe we were building something together, that my sacrifices were investments in our shared future. And now I'm making choices for myself." After he left, I walked through the house that had been our home, mentally, cataloging what I would take and what I would leave behind. The antique writing desk that had been my grandmother's, the collection of art books I'd accumulated over years, the blue ceramic vase we'd bought on our honeymoon in Greece. In the spare bedroom that had once been designated as a nursery, I stood looking at the blank walls where I'd once imagined hanging mobiles and growth charts. The grief of our inability to conceive had been a private wound, one that had festered between us because neither knew how to heal the other. Now I wondered if that shared pain might have eventually broken us even without Melissa. I spent the 2 weekend packing essentials and making arrangements for the rest to be shipped once I found permanent housing in the city. Rebecca helped, bringing boxes and takeout, filling the emptying rooms with her chatter about the art scene I was about to rejoin. "Are you scared?" she asked as we sat on the floor surrounded by half-packed books. "Terrified," I admitted, but in a way that feels like being alive again. David came by one last time the evening before my departure. He stood awkwardly in the foyer, taking in the boxes and suitcases. "I still think we could work through this," he said, hands in his pockets like a schoolboy. "Couples therapy, a fresh start somewhere new together." I studied his face, still handsome, still familiar, still capable of stirring echoes of the love we'd shared, but something fundamental had shifted inside me. A tectonic movement that had created new landscapes I was only beginning to explore. "I need to find out who I am without you," I said gently. "Maybe someday I'll be ready to think about reconciliation, but not now." He nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'll always love you, Sarah. Remember that." After he left, I opened a bottle of wine and took it to the back porch, the same spot where I'd sat shell-shocked after discovering his betrayal. The night air was cool against my skin, crickets providing a gentle symphony from the garden I'd nurture but would never see bloom. My phone lit up with a text from Catherine. "Office is ready for you Monday. Team excited to meet you. Sonaner Sunday. Night to celebrate your return?" I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. Looking forward to it." Tomorrow I would drive away from this house and the life I'd built within its walls. I didn't know if the pain of David's betrayal would ever fully heal, or if the love we'd shared was truly beyond repair. But for the first time in years, uncertainty felt like an open door, rather than an abyss. I raised my glass to the stars, emerging above me. "To new beginnings," I whispered, and meant it.